What is up, New Beginnings Church? Happy Monday morning to you. Welcome to our devotional series. Let's do this. If you don't know, we're in a walk through the Book of Colossians that started last week. And so if you're just picking up, you took a week off for some reason, I would go back and watch those, because as we walk through the Book of Colossians, it is a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to a church. And it wasn't a church that he started. A church leader had visited him in a Roman prison cell, told him about the church, and said, hey, can you write this to kind of encourage and teach and correct my church back home? And so Paul writes this letter. And in the opening part of the letter, of course, he prays for the church. We talked about that last week, these beautiful ingredients in this opening prayer. But then the apostle seems to pivot so naturally from praying to these people to just talking about God. And I love to hear the apostle Paul talk about God. It's so beautiful. So let's read this. Watch this. Colossians chapter 1, verse number 15 says this. He says, Jesus, the Son, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authority. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Just some real beautiful language here. We'll talk a little bit about the church of Colossae, maybe what they were dealing with and certain cultural issues that they were wrestling with. But this opening thought I want to give you is just simply like, he just paints this beautiful picture of what God is like, and he's pointing to Jesus. And so again, if the Apostle Paul is going to like, hey, let me tell you about Jesus, let me tell you about God, let me unpack this thing for you. The first thing that he really shows you is this. It's in this opening verse. He goes, the Son is the image of the invisible God, meaning this, Jesus is God in a body. And I think this is so important because some of us, we can get some real kind of warped ideas and images and imaginations of what God is like. And the Apostle Paul is simply saying, hey, if you want to know what God is like, just look to Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate revelation of who God is. Because I know a lot of times we'll read stuff in the Old Testament and be confused, or we'll hear stuff from maybe our tradition and be a little confused, or we'll just have, again, pop culture images in reference to God. Heck, some of our images of God come back from painting and artwork from the Enlightenment. So these weird images of God. And he goes, no. Let me just help you real quick here. If you ever wanted to know what God was like, go look at Jesus. And that's going to help you kind of, I think, undo any negative images that you might have of God. As a matter of fact, I love what A.W. Tozer says. He's got this beautiful thing, this quote here. It says, the most important fact about any man is not what he at a given time may say or do, but what he in his deep heart conceives God to be like. And so again, if we're going to be Christ followers, I want us to have the best, greatest possible image of what God is like. And again, the way to do that is to look to Jesus, so that we can have that kind of I think, again, some of us, depending on how we grew up, we can see God through the lens of our own personality, and we think God's like us. We certainly think God would be a part of our political party, right? We think that. Sometimes we think about God in terms of our religious tradition. So if we grew up in a church that was heavy on guilt, man, we always think God is this judge, and he's probably got a big black robe behind a big giant thing, and he's got a gavel ready to... we get all these images. He's saying Jesus is the best image of what God looks like. I'll prove it to you. This is what Jesus said about himself. In John 10:30, he said, I and the Father are one. Can't separate. This is what God looks like, right? John 14, verse 9, he's having a conversation with the disciples, and he goes, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. I'm what God looks like. And then my favorite one, another beautifully written verse, Hebrews 1:3 says that the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. And so anyway, in light of that, here's my big encouragement to you. We should always be living a life where we glean from the life and the person and the teachings of Jesus. Because when I read the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, and I read everything they wrote down about Jesus and how he treated people, how he interacted with people, how he thought, what he taught, all that stuff, here's what I really want you to know. Walk with Jesus. Learn from Jesus, because Jesus will lead you to an abundant life. Can I get an amen? So, just in case we have these bad images of God that come from maybe bad religious teaching, or maybe from culture, or maybe from our own, again, wanting to see God the way that we are and make God in our own image, right? I want us to make God into the image of Jesus, because he's the exact representation of his being. And so let's start there and let's celebrate the life of Jesus. Let's follow Jesus and follow him towards that abundant life. Can I get an amen? Church, I love you so much. Get here tomorrow and we'll pick right back up. God bless you.